My name is Olivia Georgia. I'm Executive Director of Cities Living Laboratory. We are thrilled that you all could participate today. Let me give you a little bit of background just in case you don't know anything about Cities Living Laboratory. CALL was the brainchild of Mary Miss, a very prominent and beloved environmental artist. Mary's work and her practice has been really grounded in collaboration across disciplines and across sectors. And she founded CALL in order to strengthen artists or provide opportunities for artists to collaborate with scientists and other experts and communities to help foster more healthy and equitable urban environments. And here in New York City, we have the project in Chinatown, which you're a part of today, and we also have been working for the past 5 or so years in the Northwest Bronx on advocating for the daylight of Tibbetts Brook. And simultaneously, we have a citywide project in Milwaukee called Watermarks that is helping to advance water stewardship in that city. And that's been gaining some really important momentum. So we invite you to take a look at our website to see some of these events and projects. So I'd like to give a little bit of biography details on Tattfoo and Donna. First, I'd like to say how much I appreciate Tattfoo being the lead artist in this particular segment. Tattfoo I've known for a very long time. We worked together on Staten Island. And on Staten Island, when I was at the Snug Harbor Cultural Center, Tattfoo participated in and designed the catalog for a very important exhibition, The Invisible Thread, which talked about the interface between Buddhism and contemporary art. And my co-curator, Robin Bertano, is somewhere in the room. Hi, Robin. Over the years, Tattfoo's work has become more and more invested in sustainable practices and healthy living through things like gardening and emergency preparedness and even growing chickens. So he's won countless awards and is a really beloved artist. And Donna Ma is the other presenter today. And Donna is a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner and acupuncturist. I hope she'll tell you a little bit about how she wound up becoming that, because I think it's very relevant to us all as life has changed so dramatically in the past year, and we see new avenues through adversity. She's on the faculty of the Pacific College of Oriental Medicine and has a private practice here in New York City. We became aware of Donna's work when she co-curated the exhibition in 2018 at the Museum of Chinese Americas on traditional Chinese medicine, its history, its practice in a variety of contemporary and, of course, historical ways. And it was a beautiful, beautiful show. So we also were very fortunate to involve her in a couple of workshops with artists Jean Shin and Mary Ting, which were very, very successful. So we're very happy that Tattfoo and Donna are going to share their thoughts with us today.
Hi everyone, my name is Tattfoo. I'm an artist and my practice is connected to ecology, sustainability, and climate change. I use the process of learn, practice, and teach to work on my project and teach it to other people. Thank you, CALL, for making this happen, and thanks, Donna, for being my partner in crime to create this amazing project. I guess that because of COVID-19, we can't really get in person with the people that we want to reach in Chinatown and beyond. So a virtual project or a project that has a longer legs might be more interesting. So I created the WuXing Oracle cards. WuXing means the 5 shape of Oracle cards. And one of my practice is connected to spirituality. My first project is nature matching system. It's connected to the color of skins of fruits and vegetables. And then after that, I explore where vegetables are being grown and how to grow them, which is SOS, Sustainable Organic Stewardship. And then the next one is called New Earth, where I learn how to survive physically and then because of the physical survival, I still think that there is something lacking in being just a human, which is a spiritual survival. That's where I venture into a spiritual survival. And that's where the oracle cards started to come into my practice. As everyone knows, probably when you talk about divination tools like tarot card, you've probably seen tarot deck that looks like this, which is a Rider-Waite deck created in the earlier of the century, 1920s. They are all painted and illustrated, all 76 card of them. But an earlier version is called Tarot de Marseille, which has only 22 of the major arcana, which is 22 archetypal type of images that you can ponder upon. That 22 is combined with a deck of playing cards, the four suites, which is the cups, the coins, the baton, and then the sword. This is basically the structure of the oracle cards, and usually you need a couple of years to get yourself used to it. But there's this new system called oracle cards, which is just basically pictures card, like a baseball card, like a trading card. It's just basically no system. It's just that doesn't have a set size, so you can just create a set of cards that you can look at. It's almost like if you're learning something new, like a new language or a new things that you've been learning. You usually use flashcard. That's how it kind of functions. So for my own practice, I have created 3 decks so far. This is the Dattatreya deck, the Adi Guru, where Dattatreya as a deity, doesn't have a guru to teach him knowledge. So he pondered upon nature, and from nature, he managed to come out with meanings. The next deck that I want to introduce you to is this one, which is a deck about the Hindu deity, where they are connected to different tools that holds in their hands. They usually are being depicted as multiple hands, and they also have a vehicle where they travel with, and those have meanings, and you can embed those meanings in your own body. And my main deck is the New Earth Oracle cards, which has a system of 4, the 4 seasons, the 4 humus, the 4 elements, and all these are being created as a deck. So with WuXing, meaning that it's 5, so I'm using the 5 things, so a different layering of 5 things, 5 elements, the 5 seasons, and so on and so forth. So that sort of gives you a clear understanding of my practice and what the idea of oracle cards versus tarot card and things like that. Next, we'll do a Q&A with Donna, and hopefully that will paint a bigger picture of what our project is. So Donna, how do you begin with your venture and study into TCM?
Well, Tattfoo, thanks for the cue up. It was a really interesting journey. I was not, formally schooled from young or grew up with a family lineage system. It really came to me because my body went a little haywire. And I ended up with, I guess I'm just telling the world this story because it's, my body went haywire. I ended up with this sort of, unknown source eczema. And I didn't really know what to do with it. I considered, definitely got assessed with, biomedicine to make sure there wasn't something unseen. But there was nothing to be done but kind of suppress it. And I just got a little stubborn, thinking that this came from somewhere, and we had to be able to unwind it, right? It just didn't, and so I really worked to kind of unwind it in my mind. That didn't happen, within my own discipline. It just kept getting worse. And ultimately, on the recommendation of actually a physician, I ended up seeking help from someone I went to grade school with, who had been studying and practicing Chinese medicine, and in a very relatively short period of time, it did unwind, so my exploration formally into the medicine came through, trying to understand what was happening in this intervention with acupuncture and Chinese herbal medicine. But I realized once I decided to formalize my studies and pursue, a master's and then ultimately, into a doctorate program, that the medicine had been part of my life all along through the care and the love of my family, my grandmothers in particular, my grandfathers in their cooking and supplying food, and just within the Chinatown community. I am a multi-generational resident of Chinatown, so I've seen Chinatown evolve here in New York through the layered lens of my own experience in childhood, my mother's and my grandfather's, who ultimately settled here. So it's been something that was revealed to me. So a lot of the things that my grandmother would tell me, which seemed, and I'm embarrassed to say, but I'll be honest, nonsensical to me, was decoded through my formal studies. Because she didn't really have the formal training and couldn't explain things to make it accessible to my system of thinking. But my studies in the medicine made what she was revealing to me through her cultured practice make sense.
Sorry about the doorbell. Suddenly someone rings the doorbell. Yeah, great. I guess that when you say medicine, sometimes it's not really real medicine as in a pill or even a bunch of herbs you put into a pot, but basically it's basic self-care, right? I believe that something like tong sui, like basically meaning sugar water, which is AKA dessert, could be healing.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are beginning to learn how to consider the concepts of medicine beyond, the structure of, I don't feel well, I'm going to go to the doctor to get a fix, to be something that we practice on a regular basis. You alluded to your discovery and process that had to do with the sort of realms of the physical, right? The mental, emotional, as well as the spiritual, right? This mind, body, spirit concept that is so much part of our common vernacular, right? Everyone uses it from, goop and, sort of wellness trends, to actually medicine in both, traditional Eastern and what we call Western or biomedicine, really beginning to capture and encompass in much more well-rounded strategies, that it's not just about, a problem and a fix. It is also about prevention. It's about even when we get the fix or the intervention, what is it that we need to do within our own day-to-day practices that will really allow the fix to remain in place, right? And this is a big part of the work that I do when I'm working with patients. It's my intervention's one thing, but in fact, it's your lifestyle and what you want to do to commit to your self-care that really reveals the power of your medicine, right? Our wellness.
Right. Yep. I guess that's why we started to design these oracle cards, because it has both showing the constitution of the vegetables or fruits and also the Chinese name. So just in case, you could literally use them if you do not know the certain particular vegetables or fruits that you're buying. You can show it to the vendors or figure out what the name is.
Right. So there's some practical aspect to sort of be inspired from these cards, just like you were revealing. You could just kind of shuffle them in a deck and see what's revealed and how you respond to it. But we're also working to incorporate sort of the Chinese medicine characteristics of these vegetables. Because interestingly enough, the Chinese medicine herbal medicine component, right? The materia medica, or translating, right? That's Latin, right? So it goes from Chinese to Latin to English, which is just so global. But the stuff of medicine, right? The stuff of the earth that makes up medicine for us. Really, I think the first books were written, or that we have evidence of, were recorded and maintained around the Han Dynasty, which is about 200 CE. So, almost 2,000 years ago. Where these medicinals were categorized, organized, dosed, prepared. And as a result of that structure and that framework, which went beyond an oral tradition to a written tradition, this is the basis around which Chinese cuisine has also grown up, or evolved, so that we can think about food, the stuff of our food, within the same systems or characteristics the way the ancients classified the medicinal components. So therefore, there is this aspect of food serving as our medicine, right? Beyond sort of the bionutrition, which is valid. I'm not, arguing, but there's this other dimensionality of what the ancients and the evolved cuisines, created in terms of their systematic understanding of how food interacted with each other and within our systems.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. Both food as medicine and food as just filling your hungry stomach. But there's also, for me personally, there's also food as spiritual nourishment, right? So you wanted to make sure the food are being ethically grown and harvested, and the farmer. There's another layer of because you are actually consuming energy, and you want that energy to be as clean as possible. Just for my own practices.
Yeah, the energy around which we approach food, right? Just thinking about how we sit now and how we maybe prepare food, how we sit to eat food. I think, one of the outcomes of this COVID-19 pandemic is we've all had to slow down. I mean, some of us at various rates, but we've slowed down a little bit. I actually have cooked more than I have in forever, right? Because I'm home. I found myself sort of going through oil and soy sauce. I'm like, where I got to go buy and replenish. And bottles used to last me, I can't even tell, I'm embarrassed to say how long it would last me, right? But we're all home cooking more and much more conscious of even taking time. So it's not only the ingredients itself, it's really our commitment to self, right? The way that we're sort of engaging in this experience of cooking, right? It's hopefully less chore and drudgery and more, I don't know, inspiration. There's an awful lot of posts about, sourdough and banana breads and,
Yeah, right.
Really getting creative around things, right?
Yeah. And in our previous conversation, you talk about as the new season approaching, being winter, any tips about getting more strengthened in our own body on winter? And of course, the next question is connected to COVID. Any remedies or strengthening in facing COVID, which someone also posted in the chat. So we have the same question. So obviously it's in everyone's mind.
Yeah. So COVID's incredibly complex, and I think we're all like overwhelmed and inundated as we await, layers of science and experience to reveal, the nature of this, what we would call in the tradition, pathogenic factor. We're seeing how it affects different people at different ages in different ways. There had been a lot of work and research and concurrent trainings that, a lot of my colleagues have been doing with what China was discovering. We do see an impact of seasonality, I think, in the way that it is, people are being struck, or the way it is striking. I think I'm going to sort of borrow from part of the tradition of the medicine also being born of a landscape and culture. Part of the strategies like we have in biomedicine around medicine and disease sort of takes on a warfare concept, right? We've got this sort of enemy outside, and we've got to sort of have, prevention and strategies of where and how it can access us, and then how we move it out. So I think prevention is a really important component to this. I think it's both a prevention within mindset as well as within body. I do think that the slowdown and the degree to which we can sort of take better care of ourselves, making sure that we are literally respirating, like, sort of taking in what serves us and releasing what no longer does, is both a physical and metaphysical concept. The food we eat is really important, right? Maintaining sort of like kind of healthy. I think the idea, and I heard this once from a teacher of mine, who used a sailing analogy. If we're getting ready to embark on a new season, right, which, we're already feeling it. I know it's hot and damp and crazy and heavy, but I can even tell that the coolness, is in the air, right? The traditional calendar, I think, had the first day of autumn, just a few days ago, in the middle of it, like kind of a heat wave. But as we begin feeling the turn of season, we can start thinking ahead, right? So we don't want to act like reactively. We want to also act preventatively as to anticipating what's coming forward. And the season of fall really brings with it, we know from what it does to this deciduous trees, kind of a dryness, right? And this dryness is something that we have to protect ourselves against, primarily like our lungs, for example. So, you know, maintaining good lung health, you know, making sure that there are certain foods that are actually lung tonifying, you know, things that are seasonal like apples and pears. You know, the daikon radish behind you in your artwork, you know, has an aspect of this that has an affinity for the lungs. And we can think about preparations of that, incorporating more soups, beginning to lighten our diet, you know, so that we can support our body systems, you know, in making the change from this hot, hot heat of summer, right, to the cooling protective posture that we have to take as temperatures get a little colder and the atmosphere gets a little drier. Right. So food can help us do this. Food can help us sort of get the ship ready for this next phase of the journey.
So as you say, there's the certain vegetables that that you mentioned. Is there any specific thing that people can do, like maybe do, I don't know, a soup or something that is like very specific so that people could try it?
Sure, I can definitely. I don't have, you know, off the top of my head, you know, I can't. You know, I'm trying to think of the kinds of things that come in autumn. You know, I think anything that's sort of generally like lightly moistens, and I don't mean moisten like cloying and heavy, but just making sure that we keep, you know, nourishment. People, I mean, we make little soups out of pear, you know, the Asian pears that begin coming into season. You know, often those are boiled down, you know, just gently and made into not a juice, right? Because a juice is a very highly concentrated sugars that have, we know, this whole insulin, you know, issue. But if we just sort of boil down soups and we can add, you know, suggest a couple of herbs, you know, that can be added to that, you know, these are just very light tonic, not even so much tonic, but sort of like moistening, because we want to protect against that dryness. So, you know, begin upping, you know, sort of the consumption of those types of fruits, apples and pears, which we'll see coming in the farmer's market very soon in Chinatown. And again, you know, very contrary to the way that we think as Americans, you know, more and more and more is not always better. So we don't have to mega dose, right? We just need to begin introducing and having things come in a balanced way, right? Because we can sort of, we're very inclined to be like, we got a mega dose, right? Because it's better, right? It's not that. It's really about the right kind of balance, right? So I would ease up on sort of what we would consider to be the tropical fruits, which are, you know, those which are grown in tropical zones that are highly sugar concentrated, and sort of think more seasonally to what's local to us, particularly in the Northeast, around apples and pears and around the dryness that will come and affect our lungs. That's really important. The other thing, by the way, for folks that are in New York, evaporative humidifiers. So this is not, this isn't food related, but just keeping moisture in the air. Evaporative humidifiers are super helpful because the air will get dry naturally around us, but radiator heat actually dries that out even more. So we're often really inclined and more vulnerable to sort of like lung, you know, dryness and coughing, you know, that may not be, you know, sick per se, but less fluid, you know, and all those microbiomes that circulate internally kind of affect, right, our immune function. So we want to keep all of that moistened from the inside, from a dietary perspective, as well as an environmental perspective, right?
Yeah, and all these things that we mentioned is mostly vegetarian, right? So is TCM advocating more vegetable-based diet, or like, I don't know, like omnivore, like meat and vegetables?
Not per se. You know, in fact, we consider all types of foods, animal products. Even there's some mineral things in the materia medica, and vegetables for sure. And I think we know. I mean, my upbringing was you know, very Lower East Side, so I probably had as many hamburgers and things from, you know, all neighborhoods as I had Chinese food, Italian and Jewish heritage foods. But from in the table that my grandparents would set, or that my mom would set when she was, you know, making Chinese food, there was always variety. You know, we didn't have, there was one steak, right, that fed 12 of us, because, and it wasn't about scarcity, it was around food style, right? It was around the ratio of vegetables to meat being probably something like, I don't know, 7 to 1. I'm just making something up, but right, depending on sort of family size, it could stretch, because we need a little bit of that protein, but not everything. And some are more warming. Lamb is considered more traditionally warming. Oh, so I should back up a little bit. So within looking at the lens of Chinese medicine offerings of how to analyze or consider the characteristics of foods, we borrow or we overlay from the herbal analysis. And at the heart of it, we're looking at what is the chi? What is the energy is kind of a rough translation, but I just use chi. What is the chi? What is the sort of life force of this vegetable that we're taking into our bodies? How does it affect our bodies? And so they're categorized by both taste and temperature. And this is some of the things that we're going to introduce in these cards, so folks have an idea about how these things come together. And so certain lamb would, for example, be warming, right? You know, the daikon is more neutral to cooling, right? So we have a way of, you know, kind of characterizing the attributes of taste and temperature to understand how they will mix and affect the body, right? And we're looking for a composite mix in the foods that we take in for the composite of our whole system. So to what Stephen was talking about with respect to environment, you know, one of the things that we have from the ancients is that we learn so much from the environment around us, right? Celestial and earthly, right? But the true innovation, I think, with Chinese medicine is that we also considered the body, the human ourselves, an internal landscape, an environment that we were attending to. So the influence of agriculture, moving from being nomadic to agricultural, really informed the way that people began thinking about self-care, tied completely to the way that we understood how to take care of the landscape of the environment outside of us, to the landscape of the body environment within us. So irrigation as a science, agriculture as a science, as much informs the Chinese medicine perspective as anything, right?
Yeah. Another question I have for you is traditional Chinese medicine. What kind of modality do you have? Meaning that I have a problem and I'll come to visit you, and what will you do? Like overall, like, because so far we've been talking about self-care and dietary, you know, food health, like doing a proper balanced diet to curb what's going on before it happened. So right now something happened, so I come and see you. So what is like the spectrum of things? Well, the most famous one is probably acupuncture. But other than acupuncture, what type of things would you be helping other people do?
Right. Here in America, we're probably most familiar with acupuncture simply because that's the modality of Chinese medicine that had to be licensed or was licensed because it involved the insertion of, stainless steel tipped, needles. And we had to have standards around which, that was done, and dispensed of. So acupuncture is what we are licensed by within this country. So that's why everyone thinks about that. But yes, there's Chinese herbal medicine. There are interventions that involve something called moxibustion, which is a specific herb that is prepared in a specific way that actually the classical texts refer to acupuncture and moxibustion together as a conjoined modality, because the burning of this herb actually had an effect of penetration to the body systems that was actually as impactful or had another kind of impact to penetrate the body systems to provoke change as if a needle would, right? And so you could imagine, being able to, maintain and have fine edge needles, in the ancient days was really difficult. So even the most fine hand wrought needle was pretty thick. So acupuncture was probably not everyone's favorite modality of intervention. Nowadays, they're really thin and very fine and sterile and one-time used and all that. But the ancients, but they discovered, or they had within their toolkit, this herb that was prepared that could actually provide that penetrating effect. Right, so that's moxibustion, and there's different ways of doing that. There's also some that are born of what we see as traditional modalities or folk modalities, like gua sha, which is a straight pressing technique that basically, there's been actually modern research done that shows that it is anti-inflammatory and pro-immune in its effect. But these are the kinds of medicines that grandmothers would practice, with their children and families. There's cupping, which is made famous nowadays by all of our athletes that are getting it in order to be able to sort of like have a reverse massage effect, where instead of pressing down, you're sort of lifting up and opening up the layers within the body and the fascial layers. Everything is around promoting connection and circuitry and connectivity, right? Because Where there is blockage, there's no flow, and then when there's no flow, there's pain. So that's physical pain, or that's sort of like maladaptive, things that happen that we experience symptomatically that as being sick, right? So everything about the medicine is about opening connections and opening circuitry and having better flow for the disposal of body waste, metabolic waste, as well as bringing in oxygen so that things are connected.
Thank you. I will just make this last comment or remarks on my own background before we open up for Q&A, is that when I was small, when I was a kid, from my own, folk Chinese practices, is that sickness comes in both actual sickness that you use traditional Chinese medicine, and also spiritual sickness, which means that when I got scared by something, my parents give me a herbal ball. I still doesn't know what that is. It's like a black color ball that encased in a wax, I remember. And then you crack the wax and then you eat that ball, supposed to cure whatever that you were afraid of, or the shock. It will dampen the shock in your spiritual system. And then the next thing is that they will get a sigil that you go to the temple, someone wrote a symbolic script, and then you burn it and drink the carbon water. And those are spiritual remedies for the type of sickness. So let's, you want to comment? Done.
Yeah, I just want to say, some of these things sound a little fantastical and disconnected, although there is there is a layer that's really important as to where our mind takes us, right? Because where the mind goes, right, the body, can follow, right? We've seen this with things, that we would sort of write off, whether it's within pharmacological research or Chinese early acupuncture research. Oh, that's a placebo effect. Like we write it off as being like incidental. However, I don't know that we should write it off so quickly, right? So we don't know really what sort of makes the connections and changes. We also know that it is, in fact, there can be traumatic experience that can be embodied, right? So much more of what we're learning from the psychological realm and looking at, trauma, whether it's physical, emotional, or psychic, we do see it becoming embodied and sort of expressed through the body. And so, these things we kind of think of like, wow, that was, what is that all about? But, we are beginning to catch up in the modern age to the connectivity and not being too lighthearted about this connection between mind, body, spirit. So thanks for bringing those stories up because they're rich for us.
Right, thank you. Hand back to Liza and Olivia for Q&A.
Well, thank you guys so much. There are a lot of questions that came up. I think more questions than we can explore in the next 10 minutes. So we're definitely going to organize some kind of follow-up, whether it's a blog or we've been discussing doing an Instagram live session. So just before we dive into the questions, if people want to follow us on Instagram, or if you're not getting our newsletter, sign up for our newsletter. And then you will definitely be notified of any more follow-up events that we do, because there's like so much good stuff going on in here. I had a question, which I'm gonna ask because I have the microphone, so to speak. And my question is sort of connected to the like bigger picture of like our communities as a whole. And I'm wondering like how like food plays a role in healing us collectively as well as individually. And if there's any thoughts about that.
Really, I think it's about connectivity. I think it is about, we just think of food, for me, whether I'm an introvert or not, food connects us. Right, food there's something communal about the food experience. Whether we're cooking for ourselves alone and I'm walking around picking up vegetables and I know the guy in the corner and there's something communal about, and I think I'm much more conscious of that, sort of having been in that lockdown period where things shut down, and that disconnection was really striking. So to have had things reopen and to go back out and shop. I remember when one of the supermarkets first opened, I went in there just to buy stuff because I was so happy they were opening. I didn't even need. But there is this sort of exchange that happens just in the economy around food. and I don't mean just the money making, it is literally an exchange of value, right? So I think that's the first part. But then when we take the time to cook for ourselves and each other, I mean, culturally growing up as a New Yorker, that is the way that I connect with people. We're in communion, right? Just bringing my Catholic background in, but literally those words mean something, because when we share food, we share so much, right?
Mm-hmm. Tattfoo, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, for me, a quick one. For me, food as a community is basically getting to know other culture. So explore different cuisine.
Great. So we have a lot of questions about specific health issues that traditional Chinese medicine addresses: coughs, eczema, some things like that. And those questions I think we're going to hold and discuss in a blog post or on our Instagram live feed. But everyone who's asked a question about a specific health issue, be assured we have a whole list. We're keeping them on a whole list, and we're going to come back to those things. I want to look at some of the more general issues. And so one issue that's come up in the questions is around some ethical issues involving traditional Chinese medicine, specifically around the use of animal products in Chinese medicine, as well as botanical things. And so, Donna, I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to some of the ethical issues that surround the use of animal products in TCM?
Right. So the big realm of where most of us sort of hear in the popular press about the use of animal products in Chinese medicine is around the exotic animals, right? This rhinoceros horns, just sort of the big game hunting, what I would refer to as sort of the trophy arts, which is much less around the routine medical application. I will tell you that for herbalists that practice here in the United States, we all comply with, CITES, which is, I can't remember what it stands for, CITES, but it's basically the guidelines for the ethical practice of both plant and animal life and sustainability. So it should also be noted that the Materia Medica went from originally 360 items to, greater than 3,000. It allows for us to make choices to substitute and change for items that may have like effect in order to be in compliance with, ethical practitioner or a patient's ethical issues or dietary challenges or needs. Right, so there's many ways that this can be very importantly accommodated.
Someone asked a question, which I think if you're not coming from a Chinese background, looking at something like Chinese medicine, it's easy to think like, is this something that is for me? And so I noticed a question from someone whose friend suggested that Chinese medicine wouldn't work for them because they weren't Chinese. Can you speak a little bit about using Chinese medicine if you're from a different background?
Yeah, I can say it can definitely work because it's about the human being, person, and process. Yeah, no, it's not, there may, or I think stereotypically we may be thinking there may be a greater affinity if one is ethnically or culturally Asian or raised. That's not really so. Sometimes I've got to sort of fight. It depends. I mean, no, it's not required. I think it's connecting to the principles in a way and within our own experience that is just human. So it's not. Some things you may feel might be more easily understood, or there's a shorthand across culture. But I think one of the greatest privileges I've had is working across cultures and translating and making relevant and real the concepts of the medicine across cultures.
And you don't have to understand or learn Chinese, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right, and I'm a living proof, embarrassingly so. I mean, as much to my parents' struggle and my own struggles in adulthood at university and after to learn Chinese, you know, I understand. I have a language block. It's the same for Spanish and French, even Latin. I understand it conceptually, but I'm not a great speaker of the language. But I know how to leave room for it because I understand the framework of the language and how to move across language systems. So, and I have to say, you know, we all have access to great books and great teachers that are the translators and transmitters of the language directly from source text. And I'm really committed to making sure that I check myself against that. So there are other ways to do this.
So for those people in the audience who are like interested in kind of dipping their feet in and learning a little bit more, can you recommend a good place to start?
This is actually a question that I've been mulling over for some time. There is not right now too much formalized. I think where folks can look. I've got a couple of books. They're okay. You know, I'm thinking of kind of formulating some workshops based on interest. I mean, this is all in process, and I'm hearing that maybe it's a good idea, or maybe there's receptivity to this. So I'll look for resources in the meantime, and we can share that. I think, Liza.
And I think because there definitely are some people in attendance today who can't go to Chinatown and are interested in figuring out how they can learn more about this from where they are. So do you think that eating seasonally is one of the best things that you can do for your health? Like, is there evidence that seasonal eating is good on multiple levels and that the food is actually better for you?
Yeah, there's this concept that we're in alignment with, you know, sort of the season, the energies of the season, and supporting our bodies to be in alignment with the environmental seasons. And that the food, you know, these vegetables or these animals that have grown up in this time period, in the same energetic cycle, can have offerings to us, you know, beyond the nutritional value, right? In its preparation and in the way that it impacts and affects our bodies.
I'm going to pick up two more of the questions that came up in the chat, and then we'll hold the rest for the next event. But one question is about whether it is about organic produce and like whether can you get organic produce, Asian produce, and does it matter does that have an impact on the healing property of food? And I should note that we're going to talk specifically about the Chinatown markets in our next workshop on the 23rd. So just generally, does whether something's organic matter?
And I like to add on is that when I get herbs from the traditional Chinese herbal shop, where can I get organic herbal remedies instead of just generic?
Yeah, I think and Stephen might know more about this than I do. I think we're catching up, you know, communal wise. We're catching up to the concept of organic. And sort of the parameters around what defines organic. And this is sort of like local as well as global, because I don't know that it's always been a priority, you know, in the consciousness of production per se. So I think, yeah, organic is best and better. It's not always accessible. It's always more expensive. And that's a barrier. But fresh is still better than prepared. You know, I sort of think about it as a scaling, right? You know, am I better to get sort of, I mean, if we can get frozen organic spinach, that's great. But we can't always get organic frozen bok choy, and frozen's not always better. Maybe the fresh bok choy. I think we're always struggling, you know, until markets regulate or regularize around the value of organic foods, right? But I wouldn't write off, me personally, I think I have to speak personally. I don't know that we have to ask a question, would you write off the benefits of fresh local vegetables versus it having to be organic and then not having it vegetables at all? So what's the choice?
And we'll pick on that up on that topic a little more on the 23rd event. I noticed that a couple people were asking some questions specifically about how the Oracle cards will work. Though the cards are in production right now, or Tattfoo is currently making them, and we're going to have an opportunity for people's personal stories and family recipes and things like that that incorporate some of these Asian vegetables, that your recipes and stories can be incorporated into the materials that are included with the cards. So Annabelle's going to pop a link into the chat. And if you could fill out, that's like a feedback form for the event, but it also gives you the opportunity to share some of your personal stories around food. If you can follow that link, we'll also send it in an email. And I just want to thank you, Tattfoo and Donna, for your time. And then if people don't mind staying on for an extra 5 minutes, we just want to close out with a few words from Valerie Imbruce, who's the scientist that's leading our Mapping Food Systems project. And Valerie can tell us a little bit more about that project and what to expect from the next upcoming program.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the intro, Liza, and to Tattfoo and Donna for this program, and Olivia for organizing. Really, really fascinating. And for me to think about, the cultural views and perspectives and uses of fruits and herbs in Chinatown is really rewarding. I got interested in Chinatown's markets when I was in graduate school, with a focus on diversity of plant species. I was in a, economic botany department at the New York Botanical Garden and, saw Chinatown as this kind of cornucopia of botanical diversity that is on view at street level. And no one was really talking about it in that way. And so, my interest was connecting urban markets with the farms that supply them. And I found that there's, a great diversity of kind of personal stories that have led to kind of serendipitous, social networks of exchange. Like you pointed out, Donna, the exchange value that's present within Chinatown's food system goes beyond the actual dollars that are spent on the food. And Chinatown has this, reputation as well as being very cheap for fruits and vegetables, for fresh produce. And that's a benefit to some, but honestly, I found that's been a turnoff to others. So in questions of organic versus not, what's healthy? How do I know if my food is good quality? Sometimes the cheapness of it acts against the markets in that way. And we're seeing some of these biases come out even more with COVID-19. As some markets are closing, they're not being sustained. People are afraid of shopping in Chinatown. And so I've been investigating more of these topics, working more with farmers to see how they've been kind of handling being within this now kind of global system of trade, getting their produce from Florida to New York City. I could tell you that the questions of what's better, organic or not, for the environment or our health are very complicated and not definitive, scientifically, particularly with the range of regulations that are in place, as well as kind of personal preferences of farmers and how they practice organic. And so these are some of the issues that we'll talk about at the next event. I don't want to take too much time here, September 23rd. But we created this story map that I sent you the link for, just to have a visual, really nice visual. And Liza and Annabelle, who's here, really worked on getting that map out together, to have a really nice visual of starting to answer some of these questions of where are fruits and vegetables that are sold in Chinatown coming to. And I'm really interested in that tool, not just being educative, but being a communication tool, so you can put your own stories and feedback into there. I'm interested in learning how new kind of pressures of the pandemic, of xenophobia and racism that we're seeing through COVID-19, along with kind of gentrification that's happening in Manhattan, how that's going to change and is changing Chinatown's market structure. And I'm interested in some of the structural questions behind that. So You have two of my research assistants here. I just want to give a shout out to Raymond Peng and Stella Huang, who are here, have been helping me with this. So we're doing some interviews, and we could always use connections. So if anyone has any personal connections to business owners for grocery stores or restaurants or other food businesses in Chinatown, it'd be really helpful to us to have some recommendations. But otherwise, we'll talk more about this on the 23rd of September, and I hope you can join us or communicate with us through call or through the story map itself.
Thank you, everyone. Olivia, do you want to close us out with an
Thank you, everybody. This was really a marvelous conversation. And of course, it feels as if we have so much more to talk about and to work together on to both learn and help improve these opportunities for accessing food, both in Chinatown and beyond. The Chinatown food system is a model and has shown to encourage more sustainable practices, and we need to be supportive if we can. So I'm again apologize for Mary not being able to join us, but I really do hope that you'll come to the event in September and send us your questions, and look forward to the next follow-up opportunity. And I think we all need to lift the ceiling a little bit more. So anyway, thank you all. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
just end it for everyone?